The Board of Health decides on a sewer hookup timeline. Details on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Tuesday, January 15th, 2013. I'm Sarah Colvin. The controversial Stewart's Creek sewering project is complete, and now it's time for residents to begin to hook up to the system. Yesterday, the Board of Health held a hearing to determine a timeline for hookup for residents of the Stewart's Creek neighborhood. The meeting was well attended, with many citizens stepping to the podium to ask questions, raise concerns, and discuss issues. 3 timeline options were on the table Monday. Barnstable Public Health Director Tom McKean outlines those 3 options.
The first option is a 1-year deadline, ordering everyone to connect to sewer within 1 year. The second option, I forgot to mention, there are other conditions in the 1-year deadline. If the system is failed, of course, it could be sooner than that. It could be 60 days, depending on the nature of the failure. And if it's a real estate transfer, the connection would be within 6 months or other deadline as established by the Board of Health. In addition, any septic systems older than 1995 would be required to connect within a shorter deadline. That was the first option. The second option, option B, would be a 2-year deadline. Property owners would be ordered to connect their dwellings to public sewer within 2 years. And with that, there were some other requirements. If it was a failed septic system, again, it could be 60 days if it was hydraulic failure, and so on. And properties offered for sale and for real estate transfers, the deadline would be 1 year. Septic systems older than March 31st, 1995, which is the date of the revised Title V Environmental Code, would be required to connect within 1 year. So those are the first 2 options: 1-year deadline, 2-year deadline. You want to talk about the third option now? The third option is a formula that I came up with based on the typical septic system lifespan of 25 to 30 years. 50% of that is 15 years, 30 divided by 2. And what I did was I came up with a formula. If your septic system is, for example, 10 years old, we would take 15 and subtract the 10, and you would have 5 years to connect your septic system, your dwelling to public sewer. If your septic system, for example, is 8.5 years old, then you would be given 6.5 years to connect to sewer by subtracting 15 minus the 8.5. And with that, any septic systems that are already in failure would be ordered to connect to sewer within 60 days if it's hydraulic failure, or up to 2 years, depending on the type of failure. Those are the 3 options: 1 year, 2 year, or a formula using a 15-year subtraction formula.
Board of Health Chair Dr. Wayne Miller elaborated on some of those options prior to the public comment period.
Any of these formulas, a failed system would require hookup to sewer within 6 months. That's been a long-standing provision here in town, and I don't see any reason why this area would be any different. In all of these formulas, the provision is there for older systems, ones that are under prior Title V iterations. In other words, ones where the environmental protection is not as great as they are with current Title Vs, would be required to hook within a shorter period of time. In the first 2, 1 year, and this last one, probably 2 years. The third situation would be under environmental issues. And here's where I should probably put an overall outline here. In many of those other cases, especially in areas in Hyannis where we did order hookup within 6 months, it was basically because of environmental issues. And back then, it was because many of those properties were within zones of contributions to water wells. Okay. One of the reasons that we are even considering this longer time frame here is because many of the properties within Stewart's Creek are not contributing to the estuary problems that we currently are facing in other areas in town. They have perfectly compliant Title V systems. But there are other systems within the Stewart's Creek that are existing with environmental variances. In all three of these situations, if there are environmental variances, in other words, if the systems are not built according to Title V specifications, there would be a quicker hookup time under all three parameters. And then the final thing is that even if you have a brand new septic system, it is not as good for the environment as putting it into a sewer. I mean, in terms of what nitrogen will do, what phosphorus will do, what the other microbial contaminants like bacteria and viruses will do, it's clearly much better for all of us and for all of our environment if there's a sewer hookup rather than a septic system. I am very aware of the current economic climate. And I really personally, here I'm speaking personally rather than for the board, I don't see the need to order people to hook up with out-of-pocket expense if we're not getting a big environmental bang out of it, okay? However, if there is a property transfer, although that will in fact perhaps decrease the amount that you will realize from the property, it's not an out-of-pocket expense, and it is clearly beneficial to everyone's well-being and health to have houses hooked up to the sewers rather than to individual septic systems, if available. So that all of these formulas have as one of their other parameters for a shortened time of hookup when there's a property transfer.
Residents then took to the podium and spoke for more than an hour, despite Dr. Miller's announcement at the meeting's beginning that the hearing was strictly to determine a timeline for connection. Many took the opportunity to raise a variety of issues surrounding the controversial project. Dr. Miller and the board listened intently and thanked residents for their contributions. A decision on timeline was made by the end of the meeting.
Just to summarize, 15-year formula because of the historic time frame lifespan of systems. Prior to 95 systems, 2-year hookup, failed systems according to current Board of Health guidelines. Upon transfer, require hookup. And then in terms of variance, anybody can ask for variance, but the things that I would like to see us clearly maybe even codify, because I may not be on the board forever, is things like if people are still paying for their current system, we should really take that into account in terms of the length of time.
Well, the 15 years is really, the 15-year formula is not 15 hot, solid years. There's the figuring out there what it is, the age of the existing system plus the number of years to connect to the sewer comes to 15. So if your system's 11 years old, you get 4 years to hook up to the sewer, which is double what the 2 years.
The board did agree to hold another hearing to finalize the language of the timeline plan. You can watch Monday's Board of Health meeting in its entirety at town.barnstable.ma.us. With Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Colvin.